all. Today, I just wanted to go over some tips for formal writing and some common issues that I typically see in student papers, so that way you guys can clear these up before your final papers are due. So let's first start with some common mistakes as far as grammar goes. So we have your and your. So obviously the Y-O-U-R is the possessive you. So that is your book, that is your car, versus the Y-O-U apostrophe R-E, which is you are. So you are great, you are wonderful, you are going to be late for class. The second one is there, there, and there. So obviously the T-H-E-R-E is location. So my car is located over there, versus there with the apostrophe R-E. So they are going to the car, versus T-H-E-I-R-E, which is the possessive form for they. So that is their car, that is their book. So they are going over there to their car, would be a way to use multiple of those in one sentence. The next one, which is a little trickier, is affect and effect. So the basic difference in this is that affect is usually a verb and effect is usually a noun. So an example is the drought affected the plant growth, whereas the law goes into effect next week. You also have than and then. So than is a comparison. So my grade was higher than yours. Um, my dog is bigger than yours, versus then with the en. This is a point in time as in addition to or next. So first I will write my paper and then I will sleep, and that is how the semester will go. Next, we have word choice. So this is really important to pay attention to your word choice whenever you're doing formal writing. So you don't want to use any slang or what are considered informal words. So an example of this is like kids versus children. So kids is really an informal way to say children, just like mom would be an informal way to say mother, and that type of things. So with this, you want to also be careful um, to not use idioms, because that is also informal with the word choice. So the grass is always greener on the other side is not really a phrase that you want to use in a formal paper. You also want to avoid unnecessary words. So unnecessary words can really confuse your meaning for your readers, and can make your sentences really clunky. So really, there are all examples of unnecessary words where you can reword your sentence. Also, do not can use contractions under any circumstances, so don't do it. Um, but contractions are considered very informal and don't have a place in formal writing. So make sure that whenever you guys are editing your papers, you're going through and editing out all of the contractions. When we talked about unnecessary words, very is one of those words that again is unnecessary, and there's always a better or a stronger way to say this. So when we talk about this, here are some examples of how to say certain words without using the word very, and it just makes your sentence a lot stronger and a lot more clear. Another issue that I generally see in papers is issues with commas. So you want to make sure that you're using a comma for introductory phrases. You want to make sure you use them to separate items in a series. So there's a lot of controversy right now, I know, around the Oxford comma, but for my purposes, please go ahead and use the Oxford comma and use it to separate all items in the series. So you can see the example in the photo where if you use the Oxford comma, it means I had eggs, toast, and orange juice, but without it, I had eggs and then toast and orange juice. So toast and orange juice would be considered together, without that comma to separate those two things. So please do use that. And then also to set off direct quotations. So if you're going to use a quote and you're saying, Lincoln said, it'd be comma, and then you can put your quotation in there. Um, Indiana University Eastern has a nice little website that has some comma basics for students. So I've included that link here. So it gives you some nice examples so you can go through and kind of see some of those comma rules. For quotation marks, so if you are using uh, quotes, then you want to make sure you use your punctuation um, the correct way and put your quotes the correct way. So what you can see on the first line is quotes belong outside the punctuation. So if you're just giving me a quote, then you will have your um, sentence, and then it would be your period, and then your quotation marks. So obviously, we typically have citations at the end of all of our quotes, because just as soon as you quote something, you want to let the reader know where that came from. So for formal writing purposes, you will end the sentence, and then do your quotes. Then you will do your parentheses with your in-text citation, and then your punctuation will go outside of that. So, no matter what you do, you are never going to have a sentence if it doesn't have a citation with a period outside the quotation marks. Your punctuation will always go inside those quotation marks. Next, first, second, and third person. So for formal writing, you will only be using third person. So here are some examples of what is first and second person, and then what is third person. So just make sure that whenever you're doing this, that you are only selecting pronouns from the bottom row. Also, as a new thing for APA, if you do not know the preferred gender of the author, then or of the person that you are referring to in your paper, then you are supposed to use they or their as the pronoun. And if you have more questions about that, you can see the new APA 7th edition on the OWL Purdue website. Next, numbers and abbreviations. So for numbers, new APA says that we are supposed to spell out numbers under 10. So if it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, then you will spell it out. If it's 10 or above, you will just write it in regular numerical form. So like a 1, 1, 1, 2, 5, 5, or 55, and that sort of thing. For abbreviations, you want to spell out the abbreviation the first time, and then you will use parentheses um, to put the abbreviation in after the first spelled out word, and then you will use the abbreviation thereafter. So as an example, the Central Intelligence Agency, parentheses, CIA said, and then after that you can just say CIA because now you have identified what it is. This is actually the same for people. So when we're talking about people's names, you will, if you're saying Abraham Lincoln, so you will say Abraham Lincoln in the first time, and then after that, you just refer to people by their last name. So from then on, you can just say Lincoln said as you move through your paper. So a little bit of overview for your formatting. So obviously we're going to use Times New Roman for our text. We are going to double space. We have 1-inch margins all around. You are going to indent your first line of each paragraph for your formatting. And you're going to make sure that your Times New Roman font is a size 12. So for long quotes, if you have more than 40 words in a quote, you're going to indent the entire quote from the left margin, and you're not going to use quotation marks. Then you will place your page numbers in the parentheses after the end punctuation. But I do caution you, before you use a long quote, stop and ask yourself, is this necessary? Can I summarize this? So if you have a long quote over 40 words, what does that add to your paper or to your thoughts or ideas? So typically if it's over 40 words, it should be something that you can summarize. So definitely take a step back before thinking about using that because you could be overusing your quotes. And then as far as when we talked about the double space throughout, a big issue that I see with a lot of students is the line spacing between paragraphs. So Word automatically defaults to a line spacing that has an 8-point after and usually multiple on the line spacing options. So in order to fix this issue or just to make sure that you have your paper set up right when you go to format, go into the paragraph on your line spacing, um, click the paragraph drop down, click line spacing options, and then you will see once that box opens, you want to make sure that you're under your spacing, you have a 0 before, a 0 after, and then that your line spacing is actually set to double. And this will ensure that you don't get those comments on your paper that says remove line spacing between paragraphs. And then finally, editing. So be sure to proofread again, and then proofread one last time. So it's always something that can be missed. So when you're proofreading, read it out loud. So sometimes a sentence makes sense to you in your head because you're the one who wrote it and you know what words are supposed to be in there and what your thought process was. But by reading it out loud, that can really help you identify if some of your sentences are unclear or maybe a little clunky and don't really make a lot of sense. You can read it one sentence at a time from the end. So start with your very last sentence, read that out loud, and then if that makes sense on its own, then move to the next sentence and just work your way backwards up through your paper. Again, this helps to identify if you have any sentence fragments because it's really easy when you read two sentences together. If they're supposed to be one sentence, then it makes sense to you. But if you have a weird punctuation in there and it makes one of them a fragment, it's harder to identify when you read them together. So reading it backwards helps that. Finally, check your formatting. So make sure you do have those 1 inch margins, your um, font is correct, that you've done your APA title page correctly, and of course, there's an APA title page template in your course, so please use that. Check your page length or word count requirements, so that way you're meeting those requirements, so you won't lose points for that. And then finally, check your citations. So you should have in-text citations for anything that is not your own words or thoughts. So anytime you summarize something, anytime you use a quote, anytime you have any type of data or information from somewhere else, you should have an in-text citation for that. In addition, you should also have a citation on your reference page that matches that in-text citation. So be sure that you're checking those and be sure that you're checking your reference page citations against your APA formatting guide in OWL Purdue. Okay, that is all I have. I hope you guys have a wonderful day and that you got some nice little tips and tricks from this. So go forth and write amazing papers.